everybody, and welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to be painting these two swans, a swan and her cygnet. I just had to look up what a baby swan was called, and they're called a cygnet. But I'm going to be painting these two birds in a lake as part of my 30 by 30 direct painting challenge that I'm participating in this month, and that's June 2022. So what is direct painting, you might ask? It's painting directly on the paper with as little prep work as possible, which if you've done watercolor before, that can be quite a challenge. Normally in my work, I rely on a really detailed underdrawing, and I'd like to have a very solid sketch before I go in with watercolor, because as you know, watercolor can be pretty unforgiving. But this challenge challenges us to go directly in with watercolor and create something in a little bit more of a looser, imperfect style, which has been just such a fantastic exercise for me. I find it hard to loosen up in my work. Like I said, I like a really detailed underdrawing, and I like things to be perfect. I like my lines to be straight, and I like to have all my prep work done in advance. So this has been a great exercise. It's been a lot of fun. With this particular swan and her little cygnet, it's an extra big challenge because they're both white. So you know, with watercolor, I don't go in with white after. I have to reserve the white of the paper. So here I am kind of creating my outline really lightly, and I'm going to tighten it up when I go in with some darker colors. But that's the biggest challenge, is making sure that I get a swan, making sure that that's the correct shape, that my swan doesn't look like a chicken or a turkey or some other type of waterfowl, but really kind of slowing down, using all my visual skills and my drawing skills with my brush to try to get that shape in as accurately as possible. This is about my third painting using this particular palette. This is my Roman Small watercolor palette, and you can see some of the colors above and a lot more of them being mixed on my ceramic plate beside me. I like a large mixing area, so I'm actually just using a plate from the dollar store. I'm using two brushes for this painting. They're both Winsor & Newton synthetic sable, so not real sable. And I have a very thick, chunky square brush and then a finer brush that I'm using for the details. I'm kind of enjoying using this square brush as well. It's not my normal brush. I tend to use round brushes, and this is helping me kind of cover larger areas and loosening up, and that's a really good tip for anybody that wants to loosen up their paintings. Try using a larger brush. Getting away from that tiny little detail brush is really helpful. So I am normally a pretty speedy painter, but just so you know, I have sped up this video in post-production. This is about 4 times faster than I normally paint. So if you're thinking that I'm painting very quickly, you're right, that's definitely a bit of a time-lapse effect. But this painting, all in all, took me about 40 minutes, so still a pretty quick painting. And you can see most of the time was actually creating that background using the wet and wet technique. So for my yellow, that light yellow that I'm using for the ground kind of under the lake, I'm using a natural sienna light from this palette. And for the water around it, I'm using mostly cobalt blue with a little bit of phthalo. And here you see me using some deep darks, and I'm using a blend of Caput Mortem, and I'm also using the gray that comes in this palette. And I apologize, I'm an English speaker, so I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I think it's Przybysz Grey, but it reminds me a lot like Daniel Smith's Moonglow. It's got 3 pigments, PB29, PR177, and PG26, and it's just this beautiful gray with these pink undertones, and it just is really gorgeous when mixed in with that Caput Mortem. It's really working well for those dark darks and those shadows, and all in all, these colors together as part of this palette, I am just loving them. So I'm continuing to go in around to perfect that swan shape, to put in these dots. I'm creating most of the water using the wet and wet technique, and I'm really loving the granulation effect and how these colors are blending. So I'm carefully going in, I'm perfecting that shape, and I'm just kind of plugging away at it before I go in to actually finish up the details. when you're creating a painting of something that's white on a darker background in watercolor, most of the work is that negative painting, that painting around the actual white object. And here I am dropping in just some shadows underneath that swan, using those colors, those dark colors mixed in. So once my background is pretty much complete, I'm finding that putting the finishing touches on these swans is really simple. I just need to add just a slight shadow and then go in there with my finest brush. This is a long pointed round brush by Winsor & Newton, so it has a beautiful point. It's relatively new. I think it is about a 4 or a 6 size, and again, it's a pointed round, so look at that beautiful tip, really great for detail. And I'm just going in, I'm adding some of those really subtle shadows. I've used a little bit of that gray color, and I've used a little bit of cobalt, and that's really all you need to suggest the feathers and suggest those really light shadows. Putting in that masking of the swan and leaving a little bit of a reflected light. So I'm trying to not go in too dark. So you can see another secret weapon when you're doing direct painting is having your ball of tissue next to you right close by, because with watercolor you can't erase, but sometimes when you put that color in too dark you can dab it out, and you'll notice that I've done that a few places in the water and a few other paintings as well. Going in and dabbing out those whites is a really great trick. So always have your paper towels or a rag ready. Here I am lifting out some of those ripples and lifting out some of that white just by wetting the color and then lifting it out with that paper towel. And then the last thing I'm doing here is adding some dark shadows. So there were some trees on the other side of the pond, and they're just rippling in there. And then finishing up my edges, getting into those dark corners. There's a few white specks here, and I'm trying to cover them up and soften these edges, but this is just about finished. So if you'd like to see me do some more paintings with this same color palette, you can check out my video painting the Rockway Gardens that I did earlier this month. I'm also going to be posting a full review of this palette sometime on my YouTube channel, so definitely hit that subscribe button so you can be notified as soon as that goes up. So I've really enjoyed this direct painting challenge so far, and I hope to post more as well as I continue on with this month. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to paint again with you soon.